given me and blessed me with, and taking my talents and trying to glorify Him through my passions and my talents. So.
Because we need Christians whose faith is alive right now.
God doesn't ask for anything in return from us. He just wants us to trust Him and believe that, He is the Almighty and sent His Son Jesus here to die on the cross to forgive us of our sins.
I'd rather share a Bible verse on Sunday morning with an audience of 100 than just try to sell products and not make any difference at all to an audience of 1 million. And then it's like, well, that's settled. Let's go.
We sit back and we develop this envious jealousy inside of us because somebody else is living the life that we want while we sit down and don't do anything about it. Get out, go enjoy it.
And then, of course, you and I would say, get in the woods.
Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the Rice Elite Podcast. My name is Tyler Pruitt, and I first of all want to thank you for listening to the show today. The Rut Calculator podcast exists to be a resource for those who love God, freedom, and the great outdoors, and that is exactly what I want the focus of this show to be about. And it's those three things: God, freedom, great outdoors. On this show so far, we have been blessed with some incredible guests, so guys like Travis T-Bone Turner, Bud Fisher, Catching Deers, John Eldridge, just to name a few here recently, and in the past we've had Jeff Danker on, Dr. Carl Miller. I mean, some pretty incredible people from all across the country with some weight to their names in the hunting industry and outdoor industry. So I'm definitely glad to be able to have this platform as the Rice Calculator podcast where I can share these conversations and the stories and the ideas that I have with people like those mentioned. And of course, I just have guys on who may not be so well known, but the cool thing about it is that we all have the same kind of passion, and that is, of course, for our faith in Christ, and our love for getting outside and hunting and fishing and just being out in the outdoors. So we all have that same passion, and that's what I love about having this platform. If this is your first time listening to the Rice Calculator podcast, I want to thank you for joining me today. If this is a return trip for you, thank you for continuing to listen to the Rice Calculator podcast, and I definitely appreciate your loyalty. This show literally would not exist if it wasn't for you guys, so I definitely appreciate the continued support that you guys constantly give, and I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. So thank you so much. If you haven't reached out to me on social media yet, I want to ask you that you go ahead and do that. I'm on Instagram at the handle @RiceKillEat. So it's all lowercase, all together, @RiceKillEat. You can find me there. I'm also on Facebook at facebook.com/RKE a field. Okay, so that's RKE as in Rice Kill Eat a field. So that's Instagram and Facebook. And I recently have jumped into the world of Parler. So I know Parler is a newer social media outlet where free speech is a guarantee, and that's definitely something that, as a freedom-loving American, I can certainly appreciate. So I have recently made a Parler account for the Rice Calculator podcast. So you guys, those of you guys that are already on there, you guys can jump on there, follow the Rice Calculator podcast on there. I haven't done a whole lot with it yet, but I'm still trying to figure out the logistics and how everything kind of works with it. I'll definitely be adding that into the social media outlets as far as the Rice Calculator podcast goes. Now today I am joined by Mike and Paul of Hunter's Blend Coffee. They are two of the three brothers-in-law that work together and own this business, Hunter's Blend Coffee. And Mike and Paul, they are incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to hunting, and then incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to making delicious coffee. I had the opportunity to try some of Hunter's Blend Coffee, as you guys are going to be able to hear in this episode, and I really enjoyed it. I am an avid coffee drinker, and I love a good cup of coffee, and I really like what Mike and Paul have put together with Hunter's Blend Coffee, and I definitely suggest you guys check it out. If you are interested in checking out Hunter's Blend Coffee, you guys can use the link in the show notes below where you're going to get 10% off of Hunter's Blend Coffee. Okay, that link is going to give you 10% off on your order of the Hunter's Blend Coffee, and I know you guys are going to enjoy that. Anybody who is a coffee drinker, you guys are going to like what Mike and Paul have put together. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into my conversation with Mike and Paul of Hunter's Blend Coffee. This is episode number 60 of the Rice Killy podcast. All right, we'll get started here. So I'm sitting here with Mike and Paul of Hunter's Blend Coffee. I appreciate you guys taking some time out of your evening tonight to be on the Rice Killy podcast with me. As a avid coffee drinker, I'm excited to be able to talk with you guys and pick your brains about the coffee making process, and of course, being able to talk with you guys about hunting as well. So thank you guys for being on the Rice Killy podcast with me.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to be with you.
No problem at all. It's certainly my pleasure. And again, I thank you. Actually, I first heard about your all's brand whenever I talked to Joe Goche. He's got the Revelation Outdoors Waterfowl Ministry down in Louisiana.
Yeah.
I know you guys do some partnership work with them. And I was doing a little bit of research on his website as I was kind of preparing for my chat with Joe. And I saw that you guys on there, doing some promotional stuff with them. And I was like, man, I got to check these guys out. So of course we started talking, and I've had the privilege of being able to try out some of your all's coffee, and it is absolutely delicious. So thank you guys for that. And again, I certainly appreciate you being on the show with me. This is great to be able to talk with you guys.
Well, Paul's the one to thank for the flavor. He's the importer and the roaster and the mad scientist that puts it all together.
My favorite Bible verse is, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good." And when you got a good cup of coffee in your hand, you know there's a good God.
That's right. That's right. I like that. So Mike was kind of telling me beforehand, Paul, that you do some mission work, or you were doing some mission work, and that's kind of course, what led up to this. So going back 15, 20 years or so, what was that kind of that mission work and church work like for you?
Yeah, I actually started a youth discipleship training thing. We take kids out of first year or two of college age, 19, 20-year-olds. And we did like a discipleship training school where they learn about themselves, learn about relationships with other people, conflict resolution, how to just love the Lord and love people, because and then a lot of them would go on to college and careers, but they always did 9 months in a country somewhere in the world. So I was traveling a lot, and this was back in 93 to 96, and that's 1992 to 96, and then moved into, with this mission organization, their long-term mission directing. I have a MA, or a Master's of Arts in Missiology, which is theology, missions, anthropology type courses. Just letting people tell you how they want to be reached, I guess you might say, and letting people discover their own problems. Rather than saying everybody that when you go to a third world country, rather than me telling them, here, you've got, what are your needs, and look, here's your problems. A lot of times they know exactly what the problem is. There's some corrupt guy up the road that's blocking the road off or something, keeping supplies coming back, or whatever it might be. They know what the problems are. They just don't know quite creatively how to fix it. So we were doing a lot of community development, agricultural projects. We would do leadership training for pastors and community leaders and church planting type things. And we did a lot of handouts. People would, many times when I go to, say, Nicaragua, pastors and mayor type people, community leaders, would line up at my door. They call it solicitudes. And they would have their long list, like they think I'm some kind of a Santa Claus, we need a roof for our building, and could you provide money for a well? And our organization did a lot of that. But I tell you, year after year, you go back and the same people line up, have another request. And it was depressing to me in that, I just knew that handouts are almost like cocaine or a drug. It's only as good as the next fix. It destroys dignity. It destroys creativity. And sometimes in the struggle, just like a chicken breaking out of an egg, that whole fight of getting out makes the chicken strong for life. And it's principles that really work. They would work in our inner city, they'd work in our counties, they'd work anywhere in the world. Where if you give people stuff, it's only as good as the next handout. So I started dreaming about, and it was a lot of the places I was going to was coffee. Coffee grows 200 to 300 miles north and south of the equator, all the way around the world on mountainous volcanic soil. So that right there covers a lot of your dictators, your politically unrest, your third world developing countries are in that whole sphere of countries around the world. And so where just about where you have human need and development needed, you have coffee growing. And so many times I was in those parts of the world up to my armpits in really good coffee. And these guys are telling me they have, they don't have 2 pennies to rub together. And I remember one time just saying, why don't you guys, when you sell your coffee, take the extra income and use some of that? That's what we do in the States. We take discretionary income, what's left over after we pay the bills, and we might give it to a organization or a nonprofit, or we do something that we think needs to get done in our community. And they looked at me like, and I kind of knew the answer, but they looked at me like I was from some other planet.
Yeah.
And then I began, this was 2001, 2002, began 2 to 3 years just studying the whole coffee crisis, we might say, just way more supply than there was demand, and that a lot of low grown, actually, no one will tell you this, but everybody knows it. And that is after the Vietnam War, the USAID and World Bank funded a lot of Robusta and low grown, bad type of coffee that would grow in Vietnam, just kind of out of a guilt complex, just shoveled tons of money in their agriculture, and they planted coffee. But it upset sort of a delicate balance of supply, where we were producing way more coffee. So for the last 25, 30 years, coffee prices are at or below the cost to produce it. And so most farmers, it goes down from there. And it might cost them $1.25 per pound to produce a good pound of coffee. They might sell most of the time for 70 or 80 cents. I always say to the guys, how do you do that? You're just going backwards, and like, next year may be better. And we didn't put any fertilizer on this year. We didn't pick. The labor's their highest cost, so they can send the pickers out just twice and strip everything rather than picking every week like they should, what's ripe selectively. Anyhow, just that, getting my head around that and understanding what these guys need is a direct purchase directly from them to the roaster. Rather, most countries have 6 to 8 middle coyotes or buyers that someone buys from the farmer and delivers to an individual, and that person is trying to put 2 pickup truckloads together for a guy. So he makes little couple pesos per pound, and he sells to that guy. The next guy is trying to get a container together for a buyer who is trying to put 10 containers together, who is trying to put 100 containers together for a German export. And everybody puts a little bit on it, but the farmer doesn't have any idea where his coffee's going. And one of the things, and Mike, you and I have not really talked about this, but one of the things that I realized also was happening 20 years ago was there was a real kind of a farm to fork or farm to cup. There was a real foodie movement happening. Kind of craft food was emerging where people wanted to know where their food came from. And so it just kind of was the right timing. We started buying full containers directly from a farmer. I had to buy their export license, their insurance. it was, to say the least, it was extremely risky. But we started that in 2006. We imported our first full container, and the pride. I mean, I could tell you story after story of amazing things that happens when a farmer is valued and treated as an equal partner in the whole chain of custody of good coffee. Um, I get their best coffee because their name is on the bag and it's shipping to the U.S. and they're so proud of that. And they give their crappy stuff to Starbucks and Fair Trade, and where it just gets lost with thousands of other farmers. Yeah, so that's kind of the back end, and I guess I could keep going, Mike. You interrupt whenever you want, but um, how I met Mike. I met Mike when I was trying to impress him because I was trying to marry his sister.
Yep.
I'm a couple years older than Mike, and so I married an older sister of his, and so every Christmas, Thanksgiving, when we get together with my wife's family, Mike and our other partner Ken Beachy, the three of us would usually find ourselves in a corner talking deer hunting, and would go to coffee. We all liked coffee, and it just kind of became a natural. And I think around the whole, there was a guy named Michael Savitt said that every man has the right to know what's in his food, and that kind of follows the whole foodie movement. But I think more and more people, if they knew kind of the underbelly of how coffee is traded and the extreme, and I'm going to just leave it there, coffee coming in through Portland and Sacramento and San Francisco and Los Angeles, those are the main coffee importers coming across the West Coast. If they have discretionary income from their importing, it is not supporting causes that Rise, Kill, and Eat, list
Right.
would support. And so it just felt like every person, we have a right to know where our food came from, and we have a right to have our food support causes that we believe in. So Hunter's Blend was born. That's kind of how it came about.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's one thing that I really I was telling Mike before we started push recording that I really loved about your all story is that you guys are all brothers-in-law, that you guys had this business idea that came from your common interest. I mean, of course, like you were saying, is hunting and coffee, and for me, those two things are something I can definitely relate to because, like I said, I'm an avid coffee drinker, and of course, the whole Rice Kelly podcast is a show about hunting, and it's how we involve our faith in hunting, and the title, of course, comes from Acts chapter 10, verse 13. So the whole audience that you guys were going after, the whole customer that you're looking for is something that I can definitely relate to. And the fact that you said every man has the right to know what's in his food, I think that's really what compels us towards hunting a lot too, is the fact that we get to go out and we get to kill an animal. Of course, I mean that's in and of itself is a whole conversation because of the violence and whatever. To say that you're going out to kill an animal is sometimes not often, I guess, taken by somebody who doesn't understand what's going on. But then you get to harvest the meat from it. You get to take the meat from it, and then you get to feed it to your family, and you get to consume it yourself. And you know where the animal was because you saw it standing, and you're the one that pulled the trigger, and it fell down. So I think that's something that we can relate to as hunters, as well as the fact that we know where our food comes from, we know where our meat comes from, we know where our coffee comes from, and that's really great that you guys have prioritized the direct trade from the farmer directly for that purpose. That's incredible.
Well, and I think those of us in the hunting community, we intuitively know when somebody has basically rebranded something and called it, hunting this or that. I mean, you take a bar of soap off the shelf and put a deer sticker on it, and all of a sudden it sells for twice as much because this is outdoor soap or whatever. And I'm not cutting down the soap manufacturers that make specific product for hunting. I'm just throwing that out as an example that you can rebrand something as hunting and then charge more. Well, this actually is the opposite of that. We're a handful of hunters that buy directly from the farmer and then support, bypass that underbelly of traditional coffee like Paul was talking about. So it's already hunter friendly just on that fact. It's avoided the potential for that money to go to causes. I mean, if you go to Starbucks, you kind of know where you're at. If you're downtown Lexington or wherever, in your camo, that's going to be a kind of a weird experience. And
Yeah.
so this is hunter friendly on that regard, but then we also support, NWTF and different organizations like that. So it actually does mean something. And then, like Paul said, it's the top 6% of coffee. So it's actually a really high grade coffee. And by buying direct, we can give the farmer the cut the middleman would have taken. We're not overpaying for it. It's not a handout. That doesn't help. Handouts don't help anybody, but they can, like he said, be proud of their own product, and we're paying them for growing a premium product. And so, yeah, it's good for the farmer and it's good for hunters. And then if you happen to like coffee like we do, it's good drinking.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's like I was saying there at the beginning. I was able to try it, and it's definitely some really good coffee. And it's interesting that you guys mentioned the handouts thing. I mean, that's like I guess that's a whole nother topic in and of itself, because you can see that a lot in our society now, is this idea of comfort and this idea that we just want everything handed to us, and I don't want to work for it. I just want somebody to hand it to me. And that's completely opposite of what I feel like the American spirit
Hmm.
really truly is, because you can have guys like yourselves, all three of you guys coming together. You're working hard at a common goal. You have a product and that you want to sell. You put it out there, and you have top quality products that you're selling to customers, and they continue to come back. And like, that's just in itself a sign that sustainability and hard work and determination is the way to have success. And it's a way to have success, especially in business and in life and whatever the situation may be. And it's really cool to hear you guys supporting, like Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, NWTF, all these NRA, all these different companies that they play integral roles in our lifestyle as hunters. And of course, also, you guys are offering a product that gets us up and going in the morning to go hunting. So I mean, it's just really cool, the parallel that you guys have with your products.
It's funny. I sometimes, just because of how important, just what you said, how important coffee is to if I'm heading to like a deer camp where I'm going to spend the weekend, if I'm going, my uncle might have been in a cabin out in northern central PA, and I'm going there for the weekend or wherever it might be. Coffee was so important. It was like the first
Yeah.
guy up in the morning, put the coffee on. That's just a no-brainer. And it's like coffee makes the hunting world go around. It's not quite like the same thing as Tootsie Rolls, or
Right.
everybody's got kind of their favorite candy or pop, but coffee it's almost, I almost say it's part of our gear, because it gets thrown in when you go to deer camp. You got to have it. That's what.
Yeah. Anytime that I'm planning a trip or whatever, that's one of the first things I think of, kind of like what you were saying, is how am I going to get my coffee if I'm out camping? Am I going to use instant coffee, or what am I going to use to get this get my coffee in the morning? And that's certainly true for myself, and I know obviously for you and a lot of people as well.
Yeah.
Well, and I think coffee is part of the nostalgia. It's kind of like having a beer over a campfire. There's just this thing about,
Yeah.
a hot cup of coffee, especially first thing in the morning. And, a lot of times we don't think about it. Where does it, this is going back what we were talking about a little bit, about it being hunting coffee, if
Yeah.
for our outdoor gear and stuff, extreme weather clothing, used to have to get high tech clothing from some camping or climbing store from a brand that, if you knew what the owner of that brand is trying to, you know, get rid of the Second Amendment or whatever, but that's where you had to go to get the high quality. Well, hunting now, we've got all our own brands that are make the top of the line outdoor, cold weather gear and stuff. And so there's a choice now with clothing. So, there's certain brands I'm not going to buy. I'm not going to go to that store or buy that brand. And so coffee is something that's kind of out of sight, out of mind. It's like, just something that's there. It's like changing oil in your car. You just, whatever. Of course, with oil, you do have a brand preference, I guess. But yeah, my point being that it's kind of go to the store and just get whatever, and we don't really think about where it comes from. But when there's an option, then people like that, to have an option of saying, "Hey, this is our coffee, and it's pretty dang good to boot." So that's the hole we try to fill.
Definitely, 100%. I can definitely agree with that. And there are certain brands, regardless of the product, whatever it may be, that I think people kind of gravitate towards based on their belief and based on their lifestyle, because of those exact things that you said. It's just because, I mean, that's who we are. It's for us specifically, for hunters. There may be certain brands like of coffee, like what you guys got going on. There may be certain brands of camo that, maybe we have a relationship with some of the people that, I don't know, maybe work with the camo brand or whatever the thing may be. We all have different preferences of bows or firearms, whatever it is. And, we have these preferences, and, it's based on our beliefs and based on what we are, of course, wanting to do. And one of the things I was kind of preparing for this was I was watching some of your all's YouTube videos, and I know that this kind of goes back on what you were saying earlier, Paul, is that you guys have one of your taglines is like coffee with a purpose. And I watched that I think it was a couple minute documentary there, and it was really cool and really moving. And I know that this is probably going to go back a little bit on what you were talking about, but why is it important to have that distinction in your business with the tagline "Coffee with a Purpose"? I mean, we've kind of hit on it a little bit here, but kind of reiterate that for us if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, the actual supporting causes and conservation and our hunting heritage, that is really important to us, and we tag it to our sales, so we just would long to sell more, to be able to give more. But I guess integrity to me is I want, whatever area of my life, I want when someone scratches or digs deeper, it's only better when they dig, not they come through the veneer and, oh, I see, this was all smoke and mirrors. And if somebody really scratches and digs and follows what we are doing, when you buy Hunter's Blend coffee, there are 80 women hand sorting coffee in Thailand that goes in our black powder blend, who were, most of them were sex trafficked. They're now have jobs with purpose because of the several containers we take a year out of there. There's health clinics, water wells, kids in school. There's teachers in schools that had no teacher on the farms in Nicaragua because of our 3 or 4 containers a year that we take out of there. And it's probably most sportsmen, most hunters aren't really motivated, kind of with a bleeding heart. I'm going to buy coffee that creates jobs in Southeast Asia. They just don't think that way. But when we say it's coffee with a purpose, brother, sister, there's a purpose, and that's what gets us up every day. That's why we're doing this. I might enjoy plumbing, I might enjoy laying block or stone, but I do this because it's changing lives and changing villages, and that's ultimately what we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's interesting that you mentioned those women that are going through that. Of course, that terrible part of their life that are coming. I guess they're coming out of it at that point. That sex trafficking thing. That's something that I guess is coming to light a lot here lately. Is that whole arena and what all is involved with that. And that's actually funny because I'm wearing my Operation Underground Railroad bracelet right now. But those guys, they do a lot of good work. So do you have relationships with people where, I don't know, this wasn't something that we had planned on talking about, but do you guys have like relationships with people that help women, find jobs with, maybe coffee forums, or you guys have programs where you can help these women out, or even children out, or even men out? I mean, whoever else is involved in these processes, is that something you guys work with?
Yes, and of course we're not the lead in it at all. The people on the ground in Thailand. What you really have are the people that are growing the coffee in the northern part are one of 7 hill tribes. There's 7 to 8 hill tribes that are semi-migratory. They kind of follow the harvest up and down. And for probably decades, they grew poppy and heroin. The whole why am I blanking out here? Poppy. What's the crop?
Yeah.
That's all right. I don't know either.
I was not a big user in my day, but so the government made them tear out the poppy plant, opium trade. They made them pull out the opium and plant coffee. Well, they were tea drinkers. They weren't even really coffee. They didn't know what good coffee was. And so probably 30, 40 years, it just kind of languished and didn't go anywhere. But those hill tribes were growing opium and growing coffee. And it was just those villages, the women would just kind of get lost. And it's really hard to talk about because I have seen it where you have extreme poverty. And let's say you've got 4 or 5 children, 3 of them are girls. One of them is particularly attractive than the others. You probably don't know everything, but there's supposedly this guy can get her work in Bangkok and a steady stream of money will be coming home to you. You don't ask any questions. It's probably something bad, and you're told it's restaurant work. So it's and I don't know, I don't know who all listens to the podcast. I really do not want to misrepresent this, but in many cases, it's actual parents out of desperation needing. Will take. It's almost like we've got 5 kids. We're all going to starve. We're going to give one to this industry, and maybe the other 4 of us can live. And it's a tough choice. But when there's real jobs in the village, that all goes away. It goes straight to the heart of that desperation. There's work, and a woman. I mean, that's not what she wants to do. I would think. So when they hear there's work back home, they find their way back. So a guy named Pat, he's from the Aka tribe. He's probably 35 years old. He's the guy that I work with. He's the one that has he's a pastor, and he also owned his parents' coffee farm, and he organized 24 farmers into a group called Abanzo. And so they put out the word, we need people to sort coffee. And they hired 80 women, and it takes them like 8 months just to hand sort our coffee each year. So the other months they're doing some pruning and picking. They're full-time working for this company. And Pat's sister has a sewing operation. I mean, they do world-class, as good as Bradley, Myrna Bradley, whatever purses. I don't buy purses either, but so there's another 50 or 60 women sewing purses and things that are sold throughout Asia. And we sell them in our coffee shop in distribute them across. So it's just, we're not there on the ground organizing anything or calling any shots. We just are trying to create a suction for their products that they only need to hire more people and get more people rescued out of that.
Yeah, that's great, because I mean, that's something like that whole industry in and of itself. There's a lot of evil going on in that industry, and it's an industry literally built on evil. And it's I think there's a lot of resources and a lot of news that are coming out now about industries like that. I don't know. I guess it's empowerment from the president. It's just different organizations like Operation Underground Railroad. I know Tim Tebow, he's joined in the fight with it. There's a End It movement that seems to occur on an annual basis. There's a lot of notoriety and a lot of publicity that's getting around about that whole industry now, and it's a great thing because a lot more people are becoming aware. And you mentioned like parents getting their kids involved in it out of desperation, and that's something that it happens. As much as I hate to say it, it happens here in our country.
Right.
Like it happens just about everywhere. And I was listening to shoot, I can't think of the guy's name now. Anyway, it's a guy from South Africa who he just came over here not too long ago. I think is Jocko Booyens, I think is his name. Yeah. Yeah. So he was discussing how pretty much like any zip code in the United States, there's a possibility of it going on, regardless of rural opportunities or regardless of urban areas.
Yeah.
And it's something that is truly tragic. And if I can, use this podcast to even bring one person to research it even more, and of course you guys doing it where you're getting women and children out of that opportunity and finding them work that is sustainable and work that doesn't involve that's awesome. And I think it's something that definitely commend you guys for.
I just think we don't really appreciate the power of a job. When unemployment in many of these countries is so high, and for the Aka, these hill tribes, they don't have citizenship automatically, so they're kind of like an animal anyways. They can be treated. You can work for a whole month and go to collect your paycheck, and the guy says, I don't owe you anything. You can get mad, get upset, but you have no recourse because you don't have an ID. You don't exist. And when you've got a whole segment of society that don't have IDs and don't exist, you talk about slavery and in enslavement, it's rampant. But there's one thing that when we talk about coffee that I'm not sure if it was on some things we talked about prior, but the idea that there's one roast or one flavor profile or one kind of coffee that is best. I hear this a lot. People ask me, what's the best coffee? And I usually turn around and say, what's the best color?
Right.
Well, I've asked that to a guy. He said, oh, blue. I said, so blue is the best color? Yeah. Well, how do you know that? I love blue. And I said, well, I hate blue. I like red. And I said, besides blue, look at a color palette for paint, and there's 1,000 different blues. Which blue? And that's the problem with coffee, when to all come under one roof, you might say, and say, we have Hunter's Blend, we have one coffee, it's the best coffee, everybody should drink it, when in fact coffee taste and flavor is kind of a learned thing. There's no right or wrong. It's if your mommy's mommy and your mommy put milk and sugar in it, then that whole habit of milk and sugar, cream and sugar, started because some of the worst coffee in the world, nasty, very bitter and astringent, was coming into the States during the Depression. And in order to tame it, you put a little sugar and a little milk, and it made it palatable. And it becomes sort of a beverage that there's people, you'll never get them off cream and sugar. That's what they like.
Yeah.
And when I meet those people, I say, more power to you. They're probably going to want our black powder, which is really strong and has kind of a full body. It handles the milk really well. But then there's these millennials with their boots on and their lumberjack get up and beard and no calluses on their hands. But they like a real light roast, that's almost, it would be on the bitter side, but there can be a sweetness or a fruitiness in a real light roast. And that's kind of what we're getting at with our Dawn's Early Light. So I guess what I'm pointing to is we have a coffee, our original roast. It caught, I would say, probably 85% of the people. They liked it. It was smooth, wasn't bitter. I could drink it without cream and sugar. We hear that a lot. But the reality is, you like what you like, and it's a little bit like maybe pizza. If all you ever ate was Pizza Hut, then you judge everything by it. Is it tastes like Pizza Hut pizza? If it doesn't, I don't like it. When in fact, go right, to the motherland, go to Sicily, Italy, and have a pizza pie, and it is nothing like Pizza Hut, and that's to some people, that's what it's got to be. So a long, long way to get at. We have three different roast levels: our light, medium, and dark, and then we have a flavor Java rum. 80%. This is going to sound kind of sexist, but 80% of flavored coffee is consumed by women. That's a national statistic.
I didn't know that.
And the fastest growing segment of hunting is women. And we hear from a lot of men too that they just drink whatever their wife brings home from the grocery store. So we decide to start targeting women, and the best way to do that is with this Java rum. It's a caramel, chocolate, vanilla rum note in it, and it's really good. So we have a Hunter's Blend. Under the Hunter Blend family, we have 4 different coffees, really for anybody that has a acquired taste that they're fussy with. It's got to be. We got it for them. There is no best coffee.
Right.
It's what you like.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to try the original roast, and that stuff's really good for me. See, me personally, I like my coffee just straight black. Like, I like it hot, I like it black, and I like it first thing in the morning. So that. Yeah, I really enjoyed drinking that because it was very smooth. It was very well balanced. It sounds like I'm gonna have to try the black powder the next time, because I like what my mom would call motor oil kind of coffee, where it's puts the hair on your chest kind of thing. So I'm gonna have to try that next time.
Yeah, I call it. I can taste the roaster in it. It's not.
Yeah.
It just got a darker, smoky note to it, and it's really kind of the palate that Starbucks kind of got us all on, where you can take lower grade coffee and roast it dark, and it tastes just as good as high quality coffee roasted dark. I mean, it's something about in the roast, you roast away all the acidity, all the sugars have caramelized and have left, and you can take crappy coffee and high scoring coffee, green coffee, and roast it all dark, and they're going to taste pretty close to the same. Burnt.
Yeah. So as somebody who's roasting, and I know me and Mike, we were talking about this before you had jumped on, but you've gone through quite an extensive, I guess, process, quite an extensive learning process of being able to actually roast coffee and to know how to develop these different flavor profiles, is what I'm trying to say. And so what does that process kind of look like as far as being able to do that? And I know you mentioned all your different products, and I mean, how difficult and how, I guess, specific do you have to be with the processes in order to have a consistent flavor that you continue to put out for customers?
So really, I guess the most simplest way to say it would be to consistently put out coffee. You have to be able to taste coffee and make notations in an organized way that a year later or 2 months later, you can come back, cup that coffee again blind, make your notes, and then look at the two score sheets and compare them. Did this coffee slip, or if it's a new harvest, did the weather pattern, the processing of it, what the farmer did, or the weather, the rain, the lack of rain, did it change the crop in any way? And so there's a protocol called the Q grader, and what it is 10 different groupings like acidity, mouthfeel, body, flavor, and there's 10 different of those, and you score it 1 to 10, and you make little notes. Taste apricot, and so there's a whole protocol for setting up the cup, and the first 3 are done when the coffee is still dry. It's called the fragrance. So you're smelling it and making notations. Then you pour water over it before you break the crust. You make notations about what you smell when it's wet. That's the aroma. And then you start slurping and spitting. Everything your mother said don't do. But you go through it, and so coffee can have anywhere from a 1 to a 100. And 100 coffee, I'm going to say it's unheard of. 90 coffee is very rare. So coffee in the 80, I think Starbucks begins considering a coffee around 78.
Mm-hmm.
And our coffee consistently scores from Nicaragua and from Thailand in the 86 to 87. And that's just from the quality side. And then when you're roasting, there's a thing called the ROR, the rate of rise. So if I put green coffee in and I'm going for, let's say, over a 15-minute period, I can go on low heat, and 12 minutes into the roast, I'm at 200 degrees, and I turn the heat and spike it the last 3 minutes and get it up to 410. That's going to taste totally different than if I put that coffee in high heat, and at 12 minutes, I'm at 400 degrees, and then I basically turn the heater off and let it walk up to 410. It's still 15 minutes. It's still 410 degrees, but the rate of rise was a whole different, that's what we call profile. It was a whole different profile if you were charting it. Those are like they can be the very same coffee that tastes totally different. So a cupper's job and a working, sometimes it's 2 different people. In my case, I'm the roaster and the cupper. I am always playing with my rate of rise or my roasting profile to see if I can improve in the cup that coffee. Or I know so like these 3 roast profiles of our light, medium, and dark, I know where I crank my heat up, where I finish it at, where I drop it. Yeah, so that in a nutshell, and you are supposed to, you can get licensed or certified as a Q grader. It's a week long of testing, and there's 400 licensed Q graders in the U.S. right now. I'm one of them, but there's a lot of people that went through it and don't keep it active. So, but you have to learn to taste coffee and make notes. And then that's probably the simplest way to describe what a roaster's job is not just turn the heat on and take what he gets, but create what he wants.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one thing that I've really commended coffee roasters on, and especially people who do it manually, and they do it, with where they're the ones that are controlling the heat and all that kind of thing. It's really a science. Like, it comes down to 100% a science, because it's all a matter of chemical reactions within the beans, and it's all a matter of different things going on. And you have to do that on a consistent basis too, because this is your all's business. I mean, this is something that you guys do. And if a customer orders, the black powder the one time and they really like it and they want it again, it's got to taste the exact same. So that's something that, is I can definitely commend you guys on as far as being able to do that, because any kind of food product, I feel like that's necessary in order to make sure that you're consistently holding customers, especially if they are liking what you're selling. So that's great that you guys have that figured out.
There's a luxury that I don't have though, and a lot of specialty coffee roasters, they'll go to brokers that import, and they are asking for samples of a particular Guatemala, let's say. And when they get it, they like it, they nail down 50 bags. And over the next year, those 50 bags come in. They don't really know the farmer. They know the name maybe of the farmer. They know the name of the farm. They roast them, and the next year, it's all up for grabs again. They're trying to find a Guatemala they like because it's an agricultural product. It does change. My commitment is to my farmers, and I'm always trying to get them to get me the best coffee they can. But that's the challenge, I guess, that I have is to when we roast a single origin like our Dawn's Early Light is the Sulawesi. That's an Indonesian island. And next year it's going to be a little different. It's not going to be bad. It's not going to be good. It's just going to be a little different. There might be kind of an apricot note, and the next year it's more of a plum note. Subtle little differences, but you would describe it different because that's in the cup. That's the way it came out. You're not trying to be influenced by last year's. So blends like our black powder is 3 different coffees that are blending. That's much easier. One coffee can change a little, and you're not going to notice it in the cup. That's the nice thing about a blend. But a single origin it's naked coffee. It shows you everything it is.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely interesting. And there, as somebody who drinks coffee on a daily basis, that there's a lot behind it that I, just the average everyday person who is buying coffee from you guys, or really coffee from the store, wherever they're getting it from, that's something that they probably don't know. They probably don't know the amount of research and the amount of work that goes into just this one cup of coffee that you're drinking at 5 o'clock in the morning when you're half asleep. I mean, it's pretty interesting. It's very impressive that you guys have invested so much into the quality and, knowing where your coffee's coming from and knowing personally the farmers. And I just think that's really awesome that you guys have done that. And
thank you.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. But one of the things too on your all's website is that you guys offer more than just coffee, which is just really cool too. Is that you guys, of course, you've got different drinkware, you've got some apparel, you got some merchandise on there. You guys have also, I was looking, you have a Rut calendar. So what's the story behind the Rut calendar? What's the purpose of that? It is, as we're recording this, it's the end of September. This is going to release probably middle of October. So it's going to be just in time for that Rut calendar to really start to become of interest to a lot of people. So kind of give us the story of what's going on with that.
I'll let you take it, Mike.
Yeah, I can. A number of years ago, a podcast a guy that recorded a podcast started buying some of the Hunter's Blend coffee, and we kind of got introduced to them. It was the Hunt Fish Journal. And over time, one of their regular guests became one of the primary hosts of the show, Jerry Everhart. And he's in his 70s. He's been hunting since the 1970s. And literally every day that he goes hunting, he's making field notes, detailed field notes. He's got manuals upon manuals packed full of field notes. And he decided to chart the days out of the year that he saw the biggest bucks. He was trying to come up with a method to the madness, and looked at the moon guides and things, and he just went backwards and analyzed all his notes, the dates he saw the biggest buck, the weather, blah blah blah, and it narrowed it down to a week or two period there in early November. But it didn't pinpoint anything. And long story short, he was able to coordinate that to the rate of change of sunlight. And once he found out that, he kept narrowing it down and down, and did all this math by hand, basically. And to the point to where in the last 15 years, I think he's gotten 13 or so Popin young caliber bucks. Now, Jerry's in his 70s. He only hunts on about 60 some acres, free range. He does have exclusive right to hunt there, so he can stay out of there and avoid pressure. But he shoots a recurve with fingers, and
Wow.
literally, and he doesn't climb the tree a lot of times every year. He's I forget, he said once how many times he had to climb the trees to get, we're talking a handful of times. And so the bottom line is, his whole theory, and I think we feel it makes sense. We've been using his system now for a number of years successfully. That the sunlight does all the chemical changes in the animals. It puts the does into heat. It in late summer, it tells the bucks to start shedding their antler, their to increase testosterone. Well, and then they shed the velvet. It's all related to the daylight tables. And so he actually did a test here a few years ago at one of his stand locations. He put a trail camera on it, and what the other part of that is, there's several parts. The big one is getting these dates figured out. Another one is using scrapes then and licking branches to draw the bucks to your area. And he had experimented with that, and one or two scrapes didn't do a whole lot, but as he kept bumping up the number of scrapes at a stand location, it really exponentially changed the number of bucks that would come in. So typically shoot for at least 6 to maybe 9 scrapes at each stand location. So the combination of the timing, waiting till the key days to hunt, and then using scrapes to get the deer to target that area. And I've
Hey, Mike, can I just interject?
Yeah.
Another idea, the research he's done is that the first time you go in on a stand is your best opportunity to kill. That deer will start feeling the pressure of you coming into that stand. So if the bucks are cruising even in October, but they're not at night, but they're still nocturnal. You don't want to be going to those stands. You're trying to find the key day where they go day in and day out, then go to the stand. And that's kind of the whole rut functional hunting system.
Yeah, what Paul's talking about, there's been, now I know there's a lot of experienced people that have figured this out just by observation, but they've done studies with radio collars on deer, and they found that hunting a stand 3 times or a total of 12 hours, that is enough to start causing the deer to shift their travel. They don't leave and go to the next county, but they'll just start circling that stand maybe 50, 100 yards out. The hunter never knows they're there.
Hmm.
And it's crazy how and they did this with radio collars, so they were able to tell hunting pressure versus deer movement. And so, yeah, exactly what Paul said. Each time you go, I had my neighbor that taught me how to shoot the bow. He said each time you go to sit in a stand, you cut your chances in half from the previous time. And I've heard that from another old timer too. And it's just so the whole point is, well, so when is that first date? Well, that's the Rut calculator that Jerry came up with. He used to do it by hand, and we'd do it for a few friends because it took him a half hour, 45 minutes. Well, it came up with a computer program. They had it online for a number of years, and then some things changed with their website last year. And so we said, well, hey, we want this Rut calculator. How about if we just host it? So he was kind enough to let us do that. We wanted it for ourselves, and we know there's plenty of other people that want it as well. So that helps you target the days to wait to go. It's obviously it's not a guarantee, but it's like I it's almost like a bell curve when they go from nighttime only to 24/7. Yes, you're going to see people kill monster bucks every day of the season. I mean, that's clearly true. But when you map out the days, it does follow this pattern. And so using the scrapes then, so you do obviously you have to have a licking branch over top of each scrape. You pull the branch down from the opposite side of the trail, so it's pointing towards you, so that when the deer puts his head up to the branch, he's not looking up at you. But the way this system works is you try to find two parallel trails, maybe 40 yards apart. That we're talking archery here, obviously, and find a decent tree that you can shoot to both trails, left and right. You go to the front of you, maybe 20 yards or whatever the distance works out, and cut a crossing trail. And anybody that's ever cut trails or mowed, you see exactly. I mean, you see the deer just start using that right away because it makes sense. It takes we do the same thing. Why crawl
Yeah.
through the brush when I can take this nice little path here? So um, that way you can get them coming and going is basically how that works. 2 years ago, it worked cookie cutter for me, and I'll just describe it to you. So you got the two trails right and left, and my crossing trail. And it was literally the first day of the Rut Calculator, the first day I hunted up in the stand. And so around around 2 o'clock, this buck came from my right rear up that trail and then turned left on the crossing trail in front of me, went to the one licking branch, and I was getting ready, and he was on the second branch when I shot him. And now again, that's cookie cutter. It's textbook how you want it to be, but it it worked. It was just so cool to see. But I start these branches the earlier in the summer you start them, the better, because the does will use them all summer long. But it's still not too late to go out and pull the licking branches. What we try to do is get 3 on the left side, 3 on the front, 3 on the right. I mean, give or take. You can have more or less, but that's kind of again, a cookie cutter way of doing it. And like I said, you pull the branch down on the opposite side of the road, anywhere from waist up to chest height in that range. You use paracord to tie it down to the proper height. If you can't find a branch, you can find a vine. They like vines a lot. And then here in a couple of weeks, we'll start our scrapes and then use a good doe and heat with buck tarsal. Jerry Everhart had a source of that. There's a deer farmer up in the Northeast, and so he wasn't selling that urine anymore, so we ended up putting that on the site too. So it's not in with the coffee; it's on its own little section there. So
Right.
yeah, my wife and kids are like, "Man, you got deer urine on a coffee website?" But and hunters understand this sort of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's not a guarantee for sure, but I can tell you on my little 5 acres that I hunt, I have had opportunity at many. Now, when I say opportunity, that's the key word. It means something different from successful harvest
Right.
of more very nice and mature bucks than you would expect, or I should have, on this small of a property, because nothing really beds on our property. We got a 2 acre strip of a creek bottom down behind our place that connects 2 pieces of woods. And so it's a great travel route, but they're just moving back and forth through there. So back in that little spot, I've got my scrape set up, and I'll tell you what, it is the funnest thing in the world. All summer long, have the trail camera out there and watching the does and the fawns use it. And the nice thing about that is you're not having to whistle at them to get them to stop. Most days when I'm hunting, if a doe and a fawn come through, they'll stop and check the scrape. Well, she just stopped with her head down, with her mind on something else. I didn't have
Yeah.
to whistle at her or do anything. So it's a great system. It's something that we've used, the Rut Calculator and the urine, for years. And then last year, just because their situation changed on their page, we said, "Well, we want to use this stuff ourselves." So that's how we kind of came to to have that on our site.
And they also had a lot of followers that every year were wanting their key dates. I mean, when you get the key dates from the calculator, it gives you the seek stage where they're just looking, and then there's a chase stage that follows, and then that lockdown breeding stage. And that seek stage is magical, in the woods. And if you've got 9 scrapes and licking branches with tarsal gland, doe, and heat urine in every one of those, and a buck comes through, in his mind, it's like, there's a girlfriend around here somewhere. I'm not going to forget this spot. And where on my trail cameras, I might have seen in my little 11-acre thing, 2 or 3 bucks, I can see 12 or 15. They're not all big, but some of them are.
Yeah, he brought up a really good point. I forgot to mention or finish. A couple years ago, Jerry put a trail camera on one of his scrapes. Now, this was one scrape at a stand location. There were 6 or 8 other scrapes there, so just one of the many. And he put the trail camera on there just to observe through that. And he had it from, early fall into late winter or whatever. And on those specific dates, if you would have drawn this on a chart, it was steeper than a bell curve. The daytime sightings at that scrape. In other words, there's bucks there, like Paul said, all at night. But the daytime shootable times, the sightings, and I don't remember the numbers anymore, but it's exponential on those days. So, like Paul said, the first 3 days, the does are still typically not quite ready. I mean, their scent is strong in the woods, but they're still hiding out. So these bucks that's when they start going 24/7, and they're not going crazy yet. They're just kind of scanning and cruising. Yeah. Then the next 3 days, it's 3 or 4 days of seeking and 3 or 4 days of chasing, and it's a little tougher then, but you still, it's those 7 days are great. But the funny thing is, Paul lives an hour west of me, and his first day of the key days is usually 1 day different from mine. So within one state, from north to south, east to west, you're going to have a day or 2 difference, and it changes per year, right? It's not always November 7th, it's going to go forward and back every year. So, if it depends, but if you have limited time, you can take off, or if you want to stack the most odds in your favor, you still, it's still hunting, there's no guarantees, but if you want to stack them in your favor, then it's a good system.
Yeah, that's why they call it hunting and not killing, because you're out there looking for them the whole time. So it's interesting that you guys mentioned the phases, like the different phases and that kind of thing of the rut actual season. Because if you're talking to anybody who hunts, especially come November, one of the first questions you ask them: have you seen them chasing yet? What are they doing right now? Are they seeking? Are they in what phase you think they're in? What are they doing on your farm? So it'd be interesting to be able to have a system like what you guys have, where you can have a rough estimate of to quantify that value and that date, in order to actually be able to see this is most likely where in this area they're going to be peaking, or this is where they're going to be chasing or seeking, or whatever the thing is. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys is, if you were mentioning your scrapes and having your system of scrapes on your land, are you guys using mock scrapes, or are you guys going in and putting your own in? Or are you just allowing the bucks to kind of make their own natural scrapes? Or what kind of does that look like for your all's preferences as far as how you have your system set up?
Well, the licking branch is the key, and you can start those as early any time. You can start them in the spring, and they'll start using them right away. To get them to start using it the first time, it's if you put a little deer, you can put a little deer urine on the branch or like a buck preorbital gland. But the does will use it all summer. Once they start using it, if you have cameras on it, you'll see the does and the bucks on those branches all summer long. And then here early October, I go out and start the scrapes. Now they would start them themselves because when they're on the branch, then they're going to scrape there. So you really wouldn't have to, but I just we do. It just to enhance it, and so we start them every fall, but it has to be, as you know, under a licking branch, or they're not. That's why they scrape down there. So
yeah, that's more of a personal question for me because it's more of an advice kind of question for me because I have about a 60-acre soybean farm, which has about 59 acres of it is open field, and then I've got a little patch of woods kind of like right in the corner that I do like a lot of the hunting in. So I'm hoping to be able to see some scrapes, and I've got a tree line that kind of cuts the field in half, but I can see some scrapes through there throughout October and that kind of thing. So that was more of an advice question for me because I'm going to be going out doing some work this weekend on the property I'm hunting on to kind of get ready for that November time. So that's definitely great that you guys offer that.
We wanted to have tutorials on the site by this fall, which we didn't get to, but just have some sit downs with Jerry, either in the shop or out in the woods, and just kind of walking through, breaking each one of these steps down, just visually and with in video or whatever, just to help, because it is a good system, and sometimes just hearing it talk through briefly, it's a little hard to get the mental picture. But that's still the goal. We want to. I'd like to get that by next year if we can get that on the site, because it's the more information you've got. And again, I want to reiterate, this isn't clearly. We're not trying to pretend that this is some kind of a guarantee. It's not.
Right. Yeah.
And do bucks chase other days out of the year? Absolutely. Now, the one thing that you'll probably see, though, the earlier chasing going on is a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times the littler bucks. The big bucks know it ain't time yet. I'm not going to waste my energy. But the little guys are all hopped up, and so
they're feeling some things they're not used to feeling.
Exactly. Oh, it was so awesome. The year that I shot that buck, that 2 years ago when I got that buck I was telling you about, that morning a little fawn came up to the one branch, and oh my gosh, he like danced around and hopped. It was he put his, had to go on his hind legs to smell up. And then he just was like, he was so jazzed about something. I don't think he knew quite what yet, but he was feeling his oats, And so that's so they don't obviously follow our rules by any stretch. And these aren't our rules. What Jerry did was basically condensed down. I mean, it's just what an insurance companies do. They look at actuary tables to figure out, hey, this kid is an 18-year-old boy with a brand new Corvette. We're going to charge him a lot for that insurance. It doesn't mean he's going to have a wreck. It doesn't mean that the 30-year-old, mom who's a super careful driver isn't going to have a wreck. But the law of averages. And that's exactly what Jerry's done with this calculator, is to put the law of averages into your favor. So we've been believers of it for years and ourselves.
Probably the biggest thing that's happened to me to keep me humble and to keep just what we're saying, that it is hunting, is right on my key day, the farmer decides it's time to go cut firewood right now, and so you got pressure that's out of your control that comes to bear on your properties, that it just messes everything up, and deer respond to the pressure. They'll go around it, or it just didn't happen that day.
Yeah.
Hey,
those are all definitely factors.
This is a total change of subject here, and I know we've gone long, but well, I should back up. Is there something you'd like to cover on that yet? The Rut Calculator and the
No,
scrape?
I think that's good. And I was actually getting ready to say I'll have links for that Rut calculator specifically down in the show notes of this, and I was going to move on. So go ahead.
We're approaching election cycle, and I forget the percentage of hunters that did not vote last year or were not registered. I think it's around half. You hear sometimes from people, I don't get involved in politics.
Yeah.
As Christians are kind of in the same boat. I mean, the percentages are similar. It's like there is a lot of people that are either not registered or that are registered but didn't vote. And there's a lot at stake. And there's a great website, huntthevote.org. You can go on there and click on their menu at the top right and get registered online. It's easy to do, and then it'll get you hooked up with your state and stuff like that. But find out the platforms of the candidates that you're voting for. Our Second Amendment is, who cares if you've got hunting property if the Second Amendment keeps getting chipped away at. There's a bill that was introduced this year. You can look it up. It's HR 5717, HR 5717, and it is the most comprehensive, broad-based, Second Amendment killer. It's insane. I mean, they list the long laundry list of specific guns that they would outlaw. And I mean, this whole bill, just the overview is a couple pages long, not even getting into the text of what the bill is.
Right.
So I would just appeal to everybody. We can't afford to quote, not get involved in politics. The fact is we all pay our taxes. We all live here. And if we don't make our voice heard, then the people that maybe don't think like us are going to have their voice heard. And so as hunters and as Christians, either, in either camp, or a lot of us are in both camps, it's really important to let our voice be heard. If all the hunters would vote along a Second Amendment concept, that would completely change elections. If all the Christians voted according to biblical principles, it would completely change. And so, but then we get stuck with policies and candidates that we don't like, and we complain about it. And this is one of the things that we can do. So I just want to really encourage everybody to definitely vote. If you haven't registered yet, by the time this airs, I think Pennsylvania's maybe October 19th. Here in Ohio, it's October 5th is the last day you can register. But it's one thing that we all still have a voice that can be heard. So I just, if we have a lot to say about our future if we use start with voting. That's the least we can do.
Yeah.
So just a big appeal to people to take it seriously, and we can make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I actually had Jim Liberator on this podcast back this summer, and of course he does a lot of stuff with Hunt the Vote, and he's got the Harvest film coming up. But I think it's very important that we get out and vote. I mean, there's a lot of people out in this world that wish they had some kind of democratic republic system where they could cast a vote and have these elected officials, because I mean, there's a lot of places where power of one person or power of a small group of people have really destroyed a lot of potentially great places because of that. So we have the opportunity as hunters and as Christians and as people and as American citizens to go out and make a difference in our own country. Like 240 years ago, our founders put together this great system that allowed the people to be in power. And I think it's important that people exercise that power as American citizens, because whenever we neglect that opportunity, I think we've seen a lot of rights and a lot of things kind of try to get trampled on over the past, I guess, 7 months or so. as soon as we give up that opportunity, we stop fighting for it. That's when things start to kind of go away, and that's exactly what they warned us about 240 years ago, and it's certainly true now. And that I'm glad you mentioned that, because there is a lot going on. There's a lot riding on this election. I've heard some people talk that that are 70, 80 years old, saying that they've never seen an election that has had so much riding on it compared to this one. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah. That's interesting that the older generation is saying that. I feel
Yeah.
that way, and I mean, I'm in my mid 50s, but it's and I agree. I think it's. I don't know if the stakes have been higher.
Yeah. I'll tell you who it was specifically. It was actually Phil Robertson. They have their Unashamed
Yeah.
podcast that
Yep.
they have,
Yep.
and they were talking about it. And he said he hasn't seen anything like this, since the '60s. Whenever the whole Vietnam thing was going on and all that kind of stuff. And but yeah, there's a lot going on. I'm definitely glad you mentioned that. But to kind of close us out here, where you guys also have a referral program with the Hunter's Blend Coffee. That's something I actually signed up for this morning. I'm going to be posting my link down in the details of the show, so you guys listening, make sure you guys check that out. You get 10% off, all that kind of thing. But kind of go into what inspired you guys to have that referral program and the reward program for your brand.
Well, it's just it's another way to stay in touch with our customers. It's really a two-way street. The more we stay in touch with the customers, the more opportunities we give our customers, the more they're going to keep coming back, and we get to kind of help each other. So, yeah, with the referral program, you get your own unique URL code, and then you can share that on your social media or whatever. People get 10% off their first purchase, so it's good for them. And then you get to earn credit, store credit towards discounted or free, coffee. And so it's a win-win. And when you spread the word, it's our way of saying thank you. It's like because you share the company, it's bringing people to us. We say thank you with the store credits. And so hopefully it's a win-win for everybody. We want to be a community of people, not just only selling coffee, but we want to create something that people want to belong to. And that's just one more way of doing that.
Yeah, that's definitely great. That's a great idea. And like you were saying, it's a win-win situation for you guys, because it's a marketing, from a business side, it's a marketing aspect of it, because you have people that are going out and, spreading the word on what you guys represent. And of course, your great coffee. And at the same time, it's a benefit for the customer as well, to be able to save a few dollars on some great coffee again. So that's definitely a good idea. And I appreciate you guys being on the Rice Elite podcast with me. This was a fun conversation. I think I've said it in the past that the only two things I know how to talk about are my faith and hunting. And I guess coffee is another one of those things I can add to that list. But, but I definitely appreciate you guys being on. So where can listeners, can they connect with Hunter's Blend Coffee, everything that you guys are doing as far as social media, all that kind of thing?
Well, we're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Hunter's Blend. We're having to, you'll notice our Facebook followers is a small number. Long story short, but we're starting over from scratch on that. So kind of stuff beyond our control, unfortunately, but which is actually part of the reason why we also started, and I'd like to mention it to your listeners too. There's another social media app. Free speech is kind of the key phrase there, and it's called Parler, Parler. The format is like Twitter, but their whole point is, of being tired of being censored on other platforms, and especially those of us in the hunting community. You can get some antis out there yelling at you, or you can get people not wanting to see some blood or who knows what. And
those are always fun to deal with.
Yeah, right. And then much less, God forbid, you mentioned the political. And it doesn't have to be political, but it can be made political. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Parler is a great. We've got a page on there as well that we like working with them, and it's a lot of good people there. And even if a person doesn't use it a lot actively, I think just getting on there and making an account and stuff, I think I think that's going to be something for the future where we can find a spot where we can share our ideas a little bit more. So, but yeah, Hunter's Blend Coffee. And then the website is huntersblendcoffee.com. And you get all the coffee on there and gear. We got shirts. Our regular green Hunter's Blend shirt, just our logo, but the flag shirt's kind of fun. The front says, I like my coffee black and my tea in the harbor, and it's a play on obviously the Boston Tea Party. And the thing is, after the Boston Tea Party, drinking tea was starting to be considered unpatriotic. So John Adams, in a letter to his wife, we've got an excerpt on the back of the shirt. He says, tea must be universally renounced. I must be weaned, and the sooner the better. So it's just a fun shirt. It's show our support for the country and our love of coffee all at the same time. But yeah, that and our drinkware and then all the Rut stuff too is on there at huntersblendcoffee.com.
That's great. I'll definitely have all that stuff linked in the show notes of the show. I'll have all the social media. I'll be sure to include the Parlor account and, of course, the website. And I'm going to have to check out that shirt. That sounds pretty awesome. That's pretty cool that you guys have that on there. But again, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mike, for being on the Rice Elite podcast. Like I said, this was a fun conversation, and I'm looking forward to maybe doing this again sometime. This is really great.
Sure thing, Tyler. Hey, it was our honor to be with you.
Yes, Tyler, appreciate it. Really enjoyed it.
All right, thank you. All right, so I know you guys enjoyed that conversation with Mike and Paul of Hunter's Blend Coffee. If you guys are interested in checking out some of their products and their delicious coffee, you guys can use the link that is in the show notes below. That's going to give you 10% off of your order of coffee, and I definitely suggest that you do that because it's some good stuff, and I know you guys are going to enjoy it. And I know you guys can definitely appreciate what Hunter's Blend Coffee stands for as far as their story goes and what it means to have coffee with a purpose. I want to ask you that you guys leave a rating and review of the Rice Elite podcast. I know I've said this plenty of times in the past, but ratings and review, they go a long way with being able to help grow the show organically, and it's an easy way for you to show your support and to show your love for what content and what the Rice Elite podcast stands for. So if you guys could do that, take 10 seconds, leave a rating and review on the podcast platform that you're listening on. That would be greatly appreciated. Thank you guys for joining me for another episode of the Rice Elite podcast. I definitely want to thank you guys that continue to come back and listen to episodes, and be sure to share this with a friend who you think may enjoy this. I know we've all got hunting buddies, we've all got people at church, we've all got people that we know that may be interested in what the Rice Elite podcast is putting out. So share this with somebody, maybe this week, maybe in the next couple of weeks as we approach hunting season, and let them know what the Rice Elite podcast is all about. All right, so my name is Tyler Pruitt. I'm looking forward to sharing another episode with you guys next week. Be sure to click that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys then.